Like usually I use about a 1-inch square brush. So get something like that. And I'm using that 8x10 panel canvas, primary colors plus black and white. Super easy to get this materials. Now, the first thing we're going to do is find our horizon line. And I'm going to make a, like a daytime sky today. So I'm going to take my blue and white, just the blue and white, not way too much white, but it should look kind of light blue, not too dark either. So somewhere in the middle, don't go crazy. And then I'm going to find the middle of the canvas and just paint a horizontal line. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're just, getting it in there. And then I'm going to go up in the sky and just make some marks like this. You're just coloring it in. Notice how I left it separated. I didn't like color it in all the way. Now I can add some more shades by adding more white and then just go in between my little chunks of the darker blue and add the white to create some lighter shades of blue. So we want to have a few different shades up in the sky. But I'm keeping it really simple today because, my primary focus is beginner acrylic painting. So, but it doesn't mean that even if you have some experience, you can't do something more simple. I actually find that really valuable to keep it simple as just a creative practice. You don't have to get too complicated with it. You can still create something. Maybe you just don't have time to do something super complicated. And then you can just jump in and create something because it's so therapeutic to do that. So see how I'm just filling it in with that lighter shade. You can always pop back in and add more blue if you want to get more of that back in there. And until we have it all painted in with blue. So again, it's just like a daytime sky. If you want some more variety in your shades up in the sky, sometimes I like to add a tiny bit of red into my light blue, which makes it a little bit cooler. Makes it a little cooler. Notice how it changed just a little bit. So it's not like I'm adding a ton of red, which would make it look more purple. It's just a touch. So it changes the shade. It cools the shade of the blue a little bit. And then you can sweep that in there maybe. Not everywhere, just, to break it up. Again, you want to see at least 3 shades of blue. 3 is like my magic number that I always talk about. And then you can kind of just dust through with the brush. I don't have a ton of paint on here, so it's not going to like change everything, but to blend it out just a bit. If you want your sky to look more blended, you can do that. It's totally optional. And then again, maybe you want to lighten your horizon. You can add more white right on your horizon line to lighten it up. And you can just add more white in some spots. Maybe it's going to look like some clouds, which I'll do a little bit of some white fluffy clouds in just a second. So get that in there though. We just want that base color to start. Not way too detailed, just different shades of blue. Get it in there. Now I'm going to clean the brush and we're going to add our watercolor. The color for the ocean, which I want to be like a turquoise water because it's just so pretty. So what I'm going to do is add my blue and just a touch of yellow. Not too much yellow. It's going to be really green if you have too much yellow, so you should have more blue than yellow in your mix. And I want it to be a little dark at first, so at the top of the water, which is going to go right under my sky, I'm going to make another horizontal line. Just like this. And then I'm going to pull down just a little bit. And then I'm going to begin to add a lot of water, or sorry, white, like white, and maybe a little more yellow. Not too much more yellow, that was kind of a lot. So adjust it, play with your color, find something. I want a light turquoise. So I have blue, a little bit of yellow, and then a lot of white to create a lighter shade. And then just pull that right below. And then maybe I just pull it down, on a diagonal or something. Maybe I pull the water down a little bit more on this side, and a little less on this side. Play around, customize. But I do want it to be lighter at the shore, which is going to be towards the bottom of this section, more white down below. Super fun. And you could always have like little patches where it looks a little darker. maybe in those areas, like underneath the water, there's some rocks or just something that's creating a little bit more of a dark color. So it doesn't have to be this solid kind of look either. And then you're going to clean your brush. Don't overwork it. You want to see a little darker, medium, and then light. And then we can always layer when it's dry too. So don't fuss with it too much. Now, cleaning and drying the brush. And then I want to create my sand color. Now today I'm just going to be really simple with it. We're only going to be using yellow, red, and a lot of white. Now notice how that peachy color looks a little bit yellow. I don't want it that yellow. I'm going to add a little more red, get more pinkish. So find your shade. It's mostly white though. You can have a tiny bit of blue mixed in if you want, but it should be mostly white with just a touch of red and yellow for that sand color. And again, maybe some parts look a little darker or lighter. So you can have more yellow or red in some parts and maybe more white in other parts. Now, just for, reference, if I add the teeniest amount of blue, it will give it a little bit of a duller color. So maybe you add just a teeny bit of blue, but be really careful about that. Not too much. Again, it's mostly white. White is like 95% here. And then I'm going to go right under my watercolor. I'm going to pull some of that sand color into the water. I'm going into the water. Then pulling down, maybe I add a little bit of a darker shade towards the bottom using more red or whatever. Again, a little bit of blue might make it look a little darker too. So you can, it's so subtle though. You just want to be really subtle with these things. All right. Perfect. Now we have our sky, our sea, and our sand. Base colors are done. Now what we can do is we can use like either a square brush or a filbert. I'm going to use a filbert today. That, which is just a little rounded topped brush. And then I'm going to add a little bit of cloud action to the sky with white. I'm going to keep it really simple though, not anything complicated. So white on the brush, not too much. And then I'm going to go to the horizon line and just make circular brush strokes coming up. And then I'm kind of feathering it out. So I don't want too many of these. Like I'll just rub in a circle and then brush underneath the shape from side to side. See how that looks pretty faint too. I'm not getting too thick with it. It shouldn't be too thick. You want it really thin at first with your clouds because then it creates this transparent look, which that's what clouds are. They are transparent. So rub in a circle and then brush it out underneath. Little bits of paint. So if you're not getting this effect, you probably just have too much paint on your brush. So mellow it out. Don't use so much. Make some different size clouds. So some little small ones. Some can just be little wisps in the sky like that, like little. And notice I can move on a diagonal or you can go horizontal. Just clouds do different things. So they can be doing some random stuff. And it could just be little streaks, little taps or streaks of white. It doesn't necessarily have to look shaped or anything because sometimes that's how clouds look. And then you can always lighten them up a little bit at the top of the shape. So if I come to those first clouds I painted over here on the right and add a little extra white just at the very top of the shape. So you see the more transparent color towards the bottom, and then you see that more opaque, thicker color towards the top. You can do that to any of them, or you can leave some of them just wispy too. Totally fine. And then I could take that white on in my shore. So I can come up right between where the sand and the water meet and just rub little bits from side to side to create the look of seafoam. Maybe even have some little bits, like maybe like waves in the distance where you just have some white coming up on little bits in the midsection of the water. So most of the white should be by the shore though. So now we have our shore. Now I'm going to clean the brush and I'm going to put in my sea cave and some shadow colors, and then we'll just add some highlights. So again, this is really simple. All we're going to do is put a frame around our colors here. Now, if your paint is really wet, you can wait for it to dry or maybe hit it with the blow dryer so that when you're adding your dark colors, it doesn't smear all the lighter colors into the darker colors, which will make it harder for you to get your colors dark. So I'm going to hit it with the blow dryer for a second. So now once it's pretty dry, again, you don't have to do that, but it will make it easier to layer. I'm going to go ahead and start adding my rocks and my sea cave shape. Now I'm going to prefer to use a square or a filbert for this. You can use your preference. I'm going to go ahead and use a medium-sized square paintbrush. So something like this is going to work well for me. And then I'm going to make some brown. Now, again, I'm going to show you two ways you can make brown. You can use your red and your yellow mixed together. It's going to give you orange. And then you can slowly add a little bit of blue. And see how that's kind of a light brown? Then I can add a little bit more blue. Now, if it starts to look kind of green, like what is happening to me right here, it just lets me know I need more red in my color mix. And then once you get a like medium to dark brown, you can go ahead and add that around the edges. So what I'm going to do is just kind of come in here and make little wiggly shapes like so, just wiggling around. And I'm going to go like this. Maybe sometimes it goes all the way up to the edge. Maybe you can cover any little things you don't like. And then maybe I'm going to cut this one off here. So see how we can kind of come down. Well, maybe I'll make it come down a little bit more. We'll just give this one all the way down. So see how now I have this little outline. And then if you want to put some rocks on the shore, which I do, you can paint just a little mountain coming out of the bottom. Or you can make a rock where you put a horizontal line and then make a little mountain shape on top of that and make them different. You can have some small rocks. You can have some big rocks. Maybe I have like a big one right here. Maybe you have some little ones in the shore. And then, you know, some medium rocks. Maybe some like long, odd shaped rocks, you know, play around. You want all different sizes and then color them in. Now my brown is pretty light with the primaries only. Again, if you have brown paint and you don't really enjoy mixing, you don't have to do the mixing, but it is what I was explaining yesterday in my in-person class was that, you know, sometimes people are like, how come you don't just give us the colors, you know, that are in the painting? So why do we have to do all this color mixing? And it's like, well, if you don't do the color mixing, you don't really know what's happening or what you're doing and why you're doing it. So it really can inhibit the learning process a little bit, in my opinion, because then you don't really know how you arrive at that color. And when you know how you can get somewhere, it gives you a greater understanding of like where you're at and how to achieve what's in your mind. So if you're just guessing and you don't really know how the colors get where they are, it can be kind of, hard to get your imagination on canvas because you don't really know what you're doing, if that makes sense. I just made some more brown up. I ran out. And again, I've just got a medium brown. I'm going to add some black to the canvas too to create some darker shades. And you can also make your brown paint by mixing red, yellow, and black instead of blue. So now we have all these fun little rocks, so cool. Now you can switch to a small brush at any time because like a small round brush or something. I do want to take that brown color and add a little shadow underneath my seafoam, which would be, imagine you're just underlining your little seafoam really lightly. Just underlining it. And it doesn't have to be a solid underline. It can be a broken underline. And then we also want to use this color to create a shadow under our rocks. So what I would do is just go right underneath the rock, maybe even add a little bit more yellow to your mix to make it a little lighter, or like more yellow and red and less blue. So it's a little bit not as dark. And then go underneath your rock and just rub from side to side and pull down into the sand a little bit of a shadow color. And so anywhere where you have like a little rock underneath, you want to give it a shadow. And you can always add more to your under your seafoam too. So now we have this like base. I'm going to go back to my square brush for a second and add a little bit more darkness. So you can use any square brush. I'm just getting a little different one. My other one, the handle was kind of loose, but I want to add some black to my brown to make it even darker. You really want to get dark here. And then on the very outer edges of the cave or the rock formations, I'm going to dab some black to make it look darker around the far edges. And you can just use pure black, but I'm just adding black to the brown. So it still has a little bit of warmth to it. But it should create a different look around the far edges. Should that begin to look a little darker. I'm just dabbing it. And then we're also going to add this on the underside of our rocks, right above the shadow and right at the very bottom of the rock. So this is going to be a horizontal line when we start adding that in just a second. I'm just getting the rest of the edges And then I'm going to take that right under on the underside of the rocks. This one just goes to the bottom of the canvas, so I can just go right there. I'm going to go to this little underside here. And we'll go under. It's like I'm re-underlining it and then tapping up into the shape just a little bit, not all the way to the top. Notice how now it looks a little bit more like solid in there. Right. So our sea cave is coming together. Super fun. Now with that same brush, I'm going to clean it off. I'm going to soften my shadows in the sand just a little bit. So I'm going to make my sand color again. So it's red, yellow, and a lot of white. Maybe just the teeniest bit of blue. Or again, that could be omitted. It's not mandatory to be in there. And then if your shadows got a little too crazy, you can always go around them with the sand color, or just sort of soften it a little bit, maybe not cover it all the way. Sometimes I find that my shadows get just like a little, they don't look as settled in as I'd like, so I will just soften them just a little bit. You still see them, but it's just, you can do that with the shadows under the waves too. Just helps to tone it down just a bit. Or you could do the reverse. Maybe you need more shadow, so you can use that darker or that light brown where you have mostly red and yellow with a tiny bit of blue and or black. So it's kind of your shadow brown. You can come back in with that. So it's a back and forth until you're like, yeah, that makes sense. I like it. But you got to have your shadows and your highlights. Now, I do want to add some highlights to the rocks, which is going to be, you know, like a lighter shade of brown. So you can take your brown, the one that you made. You can even have the one that has black in it, which is fine. Make it lighter by adding more yellow and red, so it's not as dark. So again, brown is just yellow and red. And then to darken it, you can either use black or blue. To lighten it, you use less black or blue, and or add white. So the white added will also make it look lighter. But if you don't use the red and blue or the red and yellow to lighten it at all, you're going to come with more of a gray color. So you don't, because if you just have black and white, it's going to look gray. Or if you have blue and white, it'll look kind of blue-gray, which could look pretty. It just won't look like light brown. So you want to make sure you have those red and yellow tones in there. Then you can add a little bit of white. And then that's going to create a little bit of a softer color for you. And then that's going to go around the tops of the rocks. And again, I'm going to add a little more white because mine isn't really showing up. And then you're going to add that to the top of the shapes. And then on the cave, it's just going on the outer edge where the light is going to be hitting more. So you can do that. You can pull a couple brush strokes that come closer to the edges. Maybe just like little curved brush strokes to be like, maybe there's a rock protruding out that's getting a highlight or something. So however you want to do it. And then if you want to make your highlights look really intense, just use a ton of white to where it's almost white. And then do just a little bit of that. Don't go too crazy. With the highlights. You want them in there, but you don't want them to be like taking over. You want to see all the other shades as well. So I would just really keep the last like brightest highlight really to the far top and really small. And again, you don't even have to take it that far. But the more highlights and all that you have, the more your painting is going to look a little more 3D, or just have a little more dimension. The more highlights different shades of highlights you have. Now it's really easy to soften them too. So if I want to use that medium brown to soften the highlights, I would just go right next to it and thin it out a bit. Sometimes you just need to do a little back and forth with it. And then that's pretty much it. If you want to take some more pure white on one of your smaller brushes and add some more seafoam or touch up your clouds, you can do any of those things. Sometimes I'll just go in and add a little more seafoam. Maybe add a little more highlights to the clouds, but be careful because if your painting is looking pretty good, you don't want to go in there and overwork it. You want to keep it simple and you don't want to nitpick because that's when things can start to go downhill. A little more seafoam there. But again, I'm going to go ahead and let it go. I'm going to call it done and be like, all right, I got a very simple little cloudy daytime sea cave view look, which is really pretty and fun and easy. Hopefully you had fun. And make sure to leave a comment below. Let me know what else you'd like to paint. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. And thanks for painting with me. Bye.